all up and down that crime scene and throughout the neighborhood. So that way, it wasn't difficult. Again, the difficulty and the challenges we faced was what nonsense was going to come out of his mouth next, and we were anticipating much of what would come next and being ready legally with case law and legal authority to be able to respond to that. So I think that was the hardest thing. The investigation was so thorough, so well done, that we knew the facts were solid. It was just making sure the record and the presentation was done legally accurate.
We'll do Fox Local.
So what went into your decision to perhaps minimize the number of direct witnesses that went up on that stand? And I wonder, did you expect any of these antics, and if that went into your decision?
Yes, it did. So obviously we didn't know until very late that he'd be representing himself. But we as a team set out from day one, and this was months and months ago when he still had attorneys. We vowed we would not put children on the stand. Absolutely. It wasn't necessary. Again, there were plenty of other ways to tell this story without asking a child to testify in a courtroom and relive this very, very extreme tragic situation. So that was a commitment we made as a team months ago, and we stuck by that. Certainly, as we learned his antics, we reevaluated, and we would discuss it every night as a team, is who are we going to use tomorrow, and do we really need this person? Because we were so, again, not personally offended, but professionally offended that he would insult the process and insult the victims, accuse them of financial gain for their testimony, things like that. It was just so offensive that we definitely were conscious of that in our decision making, and how can we minimize this for the best of everyone, but still provide a compelling story. So yes, it did definitely play a factor.
Court TV.
Thank you so much. Ms. Opper, there were so many victims' families inside the courtroom every day, sitting behind you. How much did that motivate you and your team, and how you presented your evidence and your closing argument? You mentioned them. And have you been able to speak to any of them that aren't here that maybe said something to you afterwards?
Yes. The motivation we received from those families was tremendous. And we knew, again, from the point when Mr. Brooks chose to represent himself, this was going to be a marathon. We talked about that many times as a team, that we just need to keep moving forward every day, whatever that looked like. But what motivated us was these families that are behind me, a lot of them, and we thought of those mothers and fathers sitting in hospital rooms with their children, and the ongoing care that they're still physically healing from and certainly emotionally healing from, and that motivated us tremendously. But you couldn't meet a nicer group of people. I mean, that's the thing, is I'm not surprised, having lived in Waukesha for 35 years, that they're good people here. And they would ask us, how are you doing? Do you guys need anything? Which was really phenomenal. They were a tremendous group of people to work for, and it was our honor to represent them and be a voice for them in the court.
Andrew Brandon, Spectrum News. Yesterday it seemed you threw Darrell Brooks a little bit of a lifeline when it came to presenting his closing argument. It seemed that the judge was going to kind of forfeit his right to do that. What made you go that route to allow him and then just object to what he was saying?
That was strategic for the appeal, to be very blunt. I wasn't throwing a lifeline to Mr. Brooks. I really had no interest in hearing what he had to say, because I heard all of his lies and stories so far. So that was just trying to do what was legally required at the moment. And I frankly wasn't sure it was going to work, because he was so difficult with Judge Darrell. But in the end, it did work. He got to blurt out what he wanted to blurt, and then the judge struck that from the record, and we were able to move on. So I was glad that that was the result, but we talked about it at the prosecution table and came up with that idea of, let's offer this, again, just to protect the record for the appeal.
Jim.
Knowing what you knew going into this with Brooks representing himself, what caught you by surprise when he presented?
Again, his absolute disrespect and dishonor to the victims, the community, and the court process.
I'll do Brian from the Freeman, and then two more we'll do CBS, and then, where are you from?
WBR.
Okay, those were the last three, so go Brian, you got one?
Yeah, there's been some discussion since the verdict was announced that perhaps a decision to represent himself is grounds for appeal. Are you concerned at all about that?
Well, Mr. Brooks has a right to an appeal. Every defendant does. And I fully expect him to take advantage of his rights as a convicted defendant in this case. I am very confident in the record that Judge Darrell made and his decision to represent himself. Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Roxanne with CBS News. What do you think about the length of time that the jury took to deliberate? Short, long, are you surprised?
We were not. We talked about it last night, and frankly, I know a lot of you were here too. We were all, by the time we got to that 8 o'clock mark, we were exhausted. And when they said they wanted to go home and rest, we were thankful, quite frankly, because we all felt the same way. It's such an emotionally draining day. And to get through all that and the nonstop banter from Mr. Brooks, it's taxing. You all witnessed it yourself. So we were grateful. We thought they gave it good thought because they went out around 6:30. Their dinner was there immediately, right? So jurors are human beings. They get a nice meal. They got a little time to talk, and then they decided, let's rest. Let's sleep on it. Always a good option for decision-making for anybody, right? Get a good night's sleep on it, and come back the next day. And then, they worked again for about another hour this morning, and with the quality of the investigation in this case, we think the verdict was fair. The timing was spot on.
WR, go ahead.
There's a lot of people who are here today, of course, but a lot of people who are also at the parade on the day of the parade who aren't here. In closing, what do you want to say to them just at the end of this process?
Well, I hope some of you caught the flavor of that. You cannot imagine until you saw some of those videos how horrific it would have been to stand there and watch that, especially when your children, and some of these witnesses testified to that, they couldn't find their children, right? And that's not just people who were struck. That there was many, many citizens who could not find their own child for a period of time. So just unbelievable. But once the car went through and everybody had that initial, the way the citizens of this community punched in, there's no other word for it. The nurses, the doctors, the EMTs, the paramedics, anybody who knew anything about how to apply a Band-Aid walked into that street and treated those people. So that was another source of strength for us, right? Is if they could do that, we can get through this.
Thank you. As we move on to the next phases of the judicial process, I'm sure that people will be readily available to provide comment as we get into, we have a court hearing on Monday at 1 o'clock, I believe, for scheduling, and I think then we're going to go into the sentencing phase, and we'll know more about that. People here behind me will make themselves available for you, I'm pretty much sure, as this goes on. But as of right now, we're going to end it and allow people to be with their families, and definitely this prosecution team needs some much-needed rest and some time away from this courthouse. So thank you all very much for being here today.
Thank you, guys.
If we could make a line so I can allow these people, thank you. It was more so at your camera. Hey, Tim, can you walk them out? You guys just follow Deputy Woodstone right here. What's that? Marshall? Yeah.